This is The First Century, a podcast devoted to stories from that influential period of history, including Rome, Judea, Christianity, and more. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Schmisek. Get ready to go back in time and enter a world before computers, the stagecoach, the printing press, or even stirrups had been invented for horses. We're about to enter the first century. Episode 13. Galilean Pilgrims in Jerusalem, the death of Livia, and the persecution of Agrippina and her two older sons. A small group of Galilean pilgrims went to Jerusalem for Passover, the only place where sacrifices could be made to God, even by lay people. Samaritans maintained that worship of God was best done at Mount Gerizim, as we'd talked about earlier. But these Galileans eagerly made their pilgrimage that Passover, walking the entire way. Before entering the temple, they purchased a lamb that was already deemed worthy by the priest to be sacrificed to God. That meant that, among other things, there were no blemishes on the lamb. The pilgrims knew that such animals cost more money, but the cost was worth it, as the pilgrims also had the assurance that God would be pleased with their unblemished sacrifice. Last year, when they were in Jerusalem, they had brought their own lamb to sacrifice. Apart from the hassle of making a pilgrimage accompanied by the animal to be sacrificed, they learned that the lamb was not worthy of being sacrificed to God. When it was inspected, a priest found a minor blemish on the creature. The pilgrims had to purchase a lamb at the temple anyway, and then bring their own lamb back home with them. But this year, while at the temple as they were sacrificing their lambs in the forecourt of the priests, they attracted the attention of Roman soldiers. A dispute quickly arose between the pilgrims and soldiers, and before anyone could even tell what the problem was, the soldiers cut down the Galilean pilgrims with swords. The interaction was so swift, bloody, and violent that the blood of the pilgrims flowed along with the blood of the Passover lambs that they were sacrificing. Not only was the execution of Galilean pilgrims in the temple forecourt an atrocity, but the fact that their blood mixed with the blood of the sacrifice made the killings even more outrageous and offensive to religious sensibilities. When Pilate heard about it, it seemed to him just another report about these religious zealots. His soldiers knew how to keep the peace. The Galileans must have done something to deserve their fate. About this time, in the year 29 CE in Rome, the Augusta, Livia, fell ill and died at the age of 86. Livia had attributed her long life to regular consumption of a particular wine. Livia had truly lived an extraordinary life. Her father sided with those who assassinated Julius Caesar, and her husband fought in the civil wars with Mark Antony against Octavian, whom she eventually married. Though she and Octavian had no children of their own, the princeps adopted her two boys, one of whom died as a young adult, and the other who would become emperor. She outlived Octavian's only biological child, Julia, and she outlived her husband, Octavian himself, by about 15 years, during which time her son Tiberius ruled the empire. In her will, Livia left her friend Servius Sulpicius Galba, a wealthy and distinguished nobleman, 50 million sesterces. But upon hearing the news and reading the will, Tiberius noticed that the sum was written in numerals. So he said that there was a mistake, something equivalent to a misplaced decimal today, and he reduced the amount to 500,000 sesterces, and there's some question as to whether Galba ever received even that. After all, Tiberius thought, he was Livia's biological son. Galba was wealthy, but he was also short and hunchbacked. There was no need to give him any inheritance. Even with his mother's death, Tiberius did not return to Rome. He was still upset that Livia had retained letters from Augustus that were critical of him. In fact, there was some expectation in Rome that Tiberius would be there, but after several days, and as the condition of Livia's corpse deteriorated, they decided to hold her funeral without him. Tiberius sent Gaius, son of deceased Germanicus and Agrippina, to deliver the oration, even though he was only about 16 years old. Though Tiberius enjoyed having Gaius around Capri, he was also concerned about the boy's ability to rule. Tiberius once said that, with Gaius, he was raising a viper in Rome's bosom. So he consulted his astrologer, Thrasyllus, who said that Gaius had more chance of riding a horse across the Gulf of Bay than of becoming emperor. So this consoled Tiberius. The Senate voted that September, the 7th month, and October, the 8th month, should be renamed Tiberius and Livius, respectively. But Tiberius declined those honors, and the months retained their standard numerical names. Tiberius also ensured that she was not deified, claiming that it was not Livia's wish. After delivering the funeral oration, Gaius lived for a time with his grandmother, Antonia Minor, the daughter of Octavia and Mark Antony. Gaius's sister Drusilla was living with Antonia as well, and one ancient Roman source says that Antonia caught her grandson Gaius in flagrantibus with his sister Drusilla. These stories only fueled the rumors of sexual deviancy that Gaius was likely learning from Tiberius on the island of Capri. With Livia out of the picture, Sejanus's campaign against Agrippina and her son Nero became even more fierce. Sejanus now felt free to move against Agrippina and her family without fear of reprisal, or so he thought. Shortly after Livia's funeral, and with rumors of incest within Agrippina's family going around, Sejanus wrote a letter to Tiberius, accusing Agrippina the Elder and her son Nero of incest. It was a scandalous and shocking charge. Incest was a crime, and though it was an outrageous charge, the very outrageousness made it stay in people's minds. Tiberius did not need much encouragement to believe these charges. Agrippina's previous defiance of Tiberius was not forgotten by the emperor, and he had grown weary of Agrippina's incessant meddling and commentary. So he wrote a letter from Capri accusing Agrippina of treason and Nero of sexual impropriety, and he asked the Senate to have them exiled. To prosecute the charges against Agrippina, Tiberius relied on an old friend, Aulus Avilius Flaccus. When word came out that Agrippina and Nero were being accused, the people gathered at the Senate building protesting any action. So the Senate demurred and looked to Tiberius for direction. The princeps promptly doubled down on his request. The Senate ultimately obliged, sending Nero to exile on the island of Pontia and Agrippina to Pondicherry. While in exile, Agrippina suffered intense cruelty and beatings, one so severe that she lost an eye. One can imagine her state and how far she had come from her days of traveling as a family with her beloved Germanicus. Now, believing that Tiberius had had Germanicus executed, she was reduced to exile and torture, separated from her children. In the year 30, Tiberius leveled charges of sexual impropriety against Drusus, the same charges he made against Drusus' brother Nero. Drusus was also accused of treason, of plotting against Tiberius. Drusus was then imprisoned on the Palatine Hill. Sejanus had achieved a significant goal. Agrippina and her two sons, Nero and Drusus, were now effectively out of the picture. Agrippina's 3 daughters were of no concern to Sejanus. Her only remaining son, Gaius, went back to live with his grandmother Antonia, and she fed young Gaius's mind with images of familial grandeur, the heroics of his later father Germanicus, and stories of recent Roman history. On New Year's Day, 31, Sejanus began a consulship with Tiberius, who also implied that Sejanus might marry Livia, the widow of Tiberius's son Drusus. Though it had taken several years, it seemed that Sejanus's plans were finally coming to fruition, and Tiberius was none the wiser that it was Sejanus and Livia, his former daughter-in-law, who were responsible for Drusus' death. Next time, we'll see that Sejanus' actions finally catch up with him, and he falls out of favor.